Captain Hyunwoo stood at the observation deck of the human ship Terra's Pride and watched the massive space station grow larger in front of them. The Galactic Council hub was bigger than any city on Earth, and it spun slowly in the darkness of space like a giant metal flower. Lights blinked all over its surface, and hundreds of different ships were docked at various ports. Some ships looked like smooth silver eggs, while others had strange spikes and curves that hurt to look at for too long. Hyunwoo had been preparing for this moment for 3 years, ever since humanity received the invitation to join the Galactic Council. Earth had finally developed faster than light travel, and within months they got a message from somewhere deep in space. The message was simple but changed everything for the human race. It said that Earth was now ready to join the community of intelligent species and that representatives should come to the hub for formal introduction. The captain turned when he heard footsteps behind him. Chief Science Officer So Young approached, with a tablet in her hands and worry lines around her eyes. She had been studying every piece of information they could gather about alien species for months, but there was still so much they did not know. "The translation software is working perfectly," So Young said as she handed him the tablet. "We tested it with 17 different alien languages, and it can handle real-time conversation without any problems." Hyunwoo nodded and looked at the screen. The device would allow them to speak with any alien they met by instantly translating their words. It was one of humanity's greatest achievements, and something that made other species take notice of Earth in the first place. Communications. Specialist Dong Ho joined them at the observation window. He was younger than the other two, but had an amazing talent for understanding how different beings communicated. His job was to make sure humans did not accidentally insult anyone or break important cultural rules. "I have been reading about council protocols," Dong Ho said while pointing at the space station. "There are over 800 different species in the council, and each one has its own customs and traditions. Some species consider eye contact to be an act of war, while others think it is rude not to stare directly at them when speaking." Security Chief Ji-won approached the group with her usual serious expression. She was responsible for keeping the human delegation safe, and she took that job very seriously. Her hand rested near her weapon even though they were supposed to be entering peaceful territory. "Our escort ships will stay here while we go to the station," Ji-won reported. "The council has strict rules about weapons and military vessels near the hub. Only our small shuttle is allowed to dock." Hyunwoo understood the reasoning, but it still made him nervous to enter alien territory with just 4 humans and no backup. Earth had sent its best people, but they were still just 4 individuals representing an entire planet of billions. The captain's communication device beeped, and a voice came through speaking perfect English. "Human vessel, Terra's Pride this is. Galactic Council Hub Traffic Control. You are cleared for docking at port 779. Please proceed slowly and follow the guidance beacons." "Thank you, Control," Hyunwoo replied. "We are honored to be here." The shuttle bay of Terra's Pride opened, and their small diplomatic craft emerged. Hyunwoo piloted the shuttle himself because he wanted to be in complete control during this historic moment. The guidance beacons led them through a maze of other ships and docking ports until they reached their assigned location. As they got closer to the station, Hyunwoo could see aliens moving around through transparent sections of the hub. Some walked on 2 legs like humans, while others seemed to float or crawl. One creature he glimpsed looked like a walking tree, while another appeared to be made of living crystal. "This is really happening," So Young whispered as she stared out the window. "We are actually meeting aliens." The docking process was surprisingly smooth, and within minutes their shuttle was secured to the station. A tube extended from the hub and attached to their airlock with a soft thud. Green lights appeared on their control panel, indicating that the connection was safe and the atmosphere was breathable for humans. Hyunwoo took a deep breath and looked at his team. "Remember, our mission is to observe, learn, and represent humanity with dignity. We do not know what to expect, but we stay calm and respectful no matter what happens." The airlock opened with a soft hiss, and the four humans stepped into the Galactic Council hub for the first time. The corridor they entered was much larger than necessary for human-sized beings, and the walls curved in a way that made Hyunwoo slightly dizzy. The air smelled strange, but not unpleasant, like flowers mixed with metal. A figure approached them from down the corridor, and Hyunwoo felt his breath catch in his throat. The being was tall and thin, and appeared to be made entirely of clear crystal that reflected light in beautiful patterns. It moved with smooth, flowing steps that made no sound on the metal floor. "Welcome, humans," the creature said in a voice that sounded like wind chimes. "I am Protocol Administrator Velthar, and I will guide you through the introduction process." Dong-ho quickly activated his translation device, but the alien was already speaking perfect English. So-young made notes on her tablet while Ji-won kept watching for any signs of danger. "Thank you, Administrator Velthar," Hyunwoo replied with a formal bow. "We are honored to be invited to join the Galactic Council." The crystal being tilted, its head in what might have been curiosity. "The honor system is interesting with your species. Most new members are simply grateful to survive their first encounter." "Survive," Ji-won repeated with concern in her voice. "Are we in danger?" Velthar made a sound that could have been laughter. "All new species must prove they are worthy of council membership before formal acceptance. This is done through what we call a diplomatic encounter with one of our more challenging member species." The humans exchanged glances, and Hyunwoo felt his stomach tighten. "What kind of encounter exactly?" "You will meet with representatives of the Draconian hegemony," Velthar explained as they walked through the corridors. "They are considered the most feared empire in this section of the galaxy. If you can successfully complete diplomatic contact with them, then you will be welcomed into the council." So-young stepped closer to Hyunwoo and whispered, "This was not mentioned in the invitation we received." Velthar led them through several more corridors that were filled with amazing sights. Aliens of every shape and size moved past them, going about their daily business. Some nodded politely at the humans, while others completely ignored them. A few stopped to stare with what seemed like curiosity or amusement. The Draconian hegemony controls 17 star systems and commands fear throughout this region of space, Velthar continued. "Their military might is legendary and their diplomatic style is quite direct. Many species find them overwhelming, have." "Any new species failed this test?" Dong-ho asked nervously. "Oh yes, many species have failed. Some simply flee in terror, while others become so intimidated they agree to become servants rather than equals." Velthar's crystal form shimmered. "But do not worry. Humans seem to have interesting qualities that might serve you well." They reached a large circular chamber with a transparent dome overhead that showed the stars. Comfortable seating areas were arranged around the room, and several aliens were already present having quiet conversations. The lighting was soft, and the atmosphere felt peaceful. "You may rest here and prepare yourselves," Velthar said. "The encounter will take place tomorrow in the main council chamber. I suggest you get adequate sleep and nutrition, as the experience can be quite intense." As the crystal administrator left them alone, the four humans sat down and looked at each other with a mixture of excitement and worry. They had come so far and learned so much, but now they faced an unexpected challenge that could determine humanity's future in the galaxy. "Well," Hyunwoo said with a tired smile, "at least we know what we are facing now. Tomorrow we meet the most feared empire in the galaxy." The next morning came too quickly for the human delegation. Hyunwoo had barely slept as he kept thinking about what they might face with the Draconian hegemony. So-young had spent most of the night reading every piece of information she could find about diplomatic encounters, but there was very little detail available. Dong-ho practiced greeting phrases in 17 different languages, even though he knew the Draconians would probably use the universal translator. Jiwan had checked and rechecked all their equipment 3 times. Velthar arrived precisely at the appointed time with the same flowing crystal movements. It is time for your encounter with the Draconian hegemony. Please follow me to the main council chamber. The corridor leading to the chamber was much wider than the others they had seen, and the walls were decorated with symbols from hundreds of different species. As they walked, Hyunwoo noticed that other aliens they passed seemed to watch them with what looked like sympathy or concern. A few even made gestures that the translation software indicated were wishes for good luck. The main chamber holds representatives from all 847 member species, Velthar explained. They will observe your encounter to determine if humanity is suitable for council membership. Do not be concerned by their attention. They reached 2 massive doors that must have been 50 feet tall and decorated with intricate carvings. The doors opened silently and revealed the most amazing sight any human had ever witnessed. The council chamber was enormous with curved seating that rose up in all directions like a giant bowl. Thousands of different alien beings filled the seats, and the variety was overwhelming. Hyunwoo saw creatures that looked like walking trees next to beings made of what appeared to be living metal. There were aliens that floated in the air without any visible means of support, and others that seemed to be made of pure energy. Some were tiny and had to sit in special elevated seats, while others were so large they took up entire sections. In the center of the chamber was a circular platform, where the humans were led to stand. The lighting focused on this area and made everything else seem dim by comparison. Hyunwoo felt like he was standing in the middle of a vast alien amphitheater with thousands of eyes watching his every move. Citizens of the Galactic Council, Velthar announced in a voice that somehow reached every corner of the massive chamber. We present the species known as humans from the planet Earth. They seek membership in our community and will now face the traditional diplomatic encounter. Murmur went through the assembled aliens, and Hyunwoo heard what sounded like hundreds of different languages being translated simultaneously. Some of the sounds were musical, while others were harsh and mechanical. The translation software in his ear was working overtime to process everything. The Draconian hegemony will now make their entrance, Velthar continued. Suddenly music began, playing that sounded like the soundtrack to an epic war movie. It was dramatic and powerful with drums and horns that echoed through the chamber. Lights dimmed even further and a spotlight appeared at one of the main entrances to the chamber floor. The aliens in the seats grew quiet and many seemed to lean forward with anticipation or fear. Some covered their eyes or made protective gestures. Even Velthar's crystal form seemed to dim slightly, as if preparing for something overwhelming. Behold the terror of 17 star systems, a voice boomed through the chamber. The conquerors of worlds and the destroyers of those who oppose them. The mighty Draconian hegemony approaches. The entrance doors burst open with dramatic force and smoke began pouring into the chamber. Through the smoke, 3 figures emerged, walking in formation toward the central platform. The music grew louder and more intense as they approached. Hyunwoo squinted through the smoke and dramatic lighting, trying to get a clear view of these feared beings. As they got closer, he could make out more details, and he felt his eyebrows rise in surprise. The Draconians were small, very small. They appeared to be about the size of house cats, but walking upright on 2 legs like tiny people. They had scales that shimmered in different colors and small wings on their backs that fluttered as they walked. Their heads were somewhat dragon-like with small horns and pointed ears, but their faces were surprisingly expressive. The lead Draconian wore elaborate armor that was clearly designed to make him look bigger and more intimidating, but the effect was somewhat diminished by the fact that the armor appeared to be made for someone about 3 feet tall. He had a flowing cape that dragged on the ground behind him and a crown that seemed too large for his small head. I am Emperor Scales of Infinite Darkness, the tiny leader announced in a voice that was surprisingly high-pitched. "Ruler of the mighty draconian hegemony and commander of our vast armada of 7 ships." So Young covered her mouth with her hand and her eyes went wide. Dong-ho made a small choking sound that he tried to cover with a cough. Ji-won's professional expression flickered for just a moment. "These pathetic mammals dare to seek membership in the council," the Emperor continued while pointing a tiny clawed finger at the humans. "They must first prove they are worthy to exist in the same galaxy as our infinite power." The 2 other draconians flanking their Emperor nodded seriously. One carried a weapon that looked like a miniature laser rifle, while the other held what appeared to be a tiny flag with the draconian symbol. Their armor clinked softly as they moved, and their little boots made almost no sound on the chamber floor. "We have conquered several mostly uninhabited moons," the Emperor declared proudly. "Our fearsome reputation strikes terror into the hearts of our enemies. Some have even surrendered before our mighty fleet of 7 ships could reach their systems." Hyun-woo bit his lip hard, trying to maintain his composure. The little Emperor was clearly trying very hard to be intimidating, but the effect was more adorable than frightening. His squeaky voice and tiny stature made him look like an angry kitten wearing medieval armor. "Our vast legions number in the hundreds," one of the other draconians added. "We possess weapons of mass destruction that can stun a space rat from 50 meters away." The assembled council members watched with what appeared to be genuine fear and respect. Some aliens were actually trembling, while others had moved back in their seats, as if trying to get away from the tiny draconians. It was clear that despite their size, these little beings had somehow earned a reputation as serious threats. "We demand tribute from these humans," Emperor Scales of Infinite Darkness announced, while striking what he probably thought was a menacing pose. "They must offer their finest warriors for our gladiatorial combat arenas, or face the consequences of defying our empire." The Emperor's cape got caught under his tiny feet as he gestured dramatically, and he stumbled slightly before catching himself. His crown tilted to one side, and he had to reach up to straighten it. The other 2 draconians quickly moved to help steady their leader while trying to maintain their own intimidating stances. So Young made another muffled sound, and her shoulders began to shake slightly. Dong-ho was breathing carefully through his nose with his lips pressed tightly together. Even Ji-won's stern expression was starting to crack around the edges. "Our empire spans multiple star systems, and our influence reaches into the darkest corners of space," the Emperor continued, while puffing out his tiny chest. "We have defeated enemies much larger than ourselves through superior tactics and overwhelming force." As he spoke, one of his small wings got tangled in his cape, and he had to pause his speech to untangle himself. The other draconians pretended not to notice while maintaining their serious expressions. The Emperor's face was turning slightly red from either embarrassment or effort. "Tremble before the might of the draconian hegemony," he squeaked while raising his tiny fist in the air. "We are the terror of this galaxy, and these humans will learn to fear our infinite power." Hyun-woo looked at his team and saw that they were all struggling with the same problem. The draconians were clearly trying very hard to be frightening and intimidating, but they were possibly the most adorable things any human had ever seen. Their tiny voices and small stature, combined with their elaborate costumes, made them look like children playing dress-up rather than fearsome galactic conquerors. The situation was becoming more difficult by the moment, as the Emperor continued his dramatic speech about conquest and domination, while occasionally having to adjust his oversized crown or untangle his cape. The humans were fighting a losing battle against their natural human response to small, cute creatures trying to act tough. Emperor Scales of Infinite Darkness was really getting into his intimidation speech now. He climbed onto a small platform that had been brought out to make him appear taller, but the effect was somewhat ruined when he had to use his tiny hands to pull himself up. His cape dragged behind him and his crown slipped down over one eye. Witness the terror that we bring to our enemies, the tiny emperor declared while striking another dramatic pose. Our advanced weapons technology includes laser cannons that can disable small spacecraft and ion blasters that can stun medium-sized mammals. Hyun-woo was pressing his lips together so hard they were turning white. Next to him, So-young had developed a slight tremor in her shoulders as she fought to control herself. Dong-ho was looking up at the ceiling and breathing very carefully through his nose. Ji-won had her hands clasped behind her back and was squeezing them so tightly her knuckles were probably turning white. Our mighty fortress world contains underground bunkers that can house our entire population, one of the other Draconians added proudly. These bunkers are equipped with the finest in miniature technology and can sustain our people for weeks during siege conditions. The Emperor nodded approvingly at his subordinate and then turned back to address the humans directly. You mammals appear to be larger than our usual enemies, but size means nothing when facing superior draconian tactics. We have defeated creatures much bigger than ourselves. As he spoke, the Emperor gestured broadly with his tiny arms, and his cape swirled around his feet. Unfortunately, this caused him to lose his balance slightly, and he had to windmill his little arms to avoid falling off the platform. One of his generals quickly moved to steady him while pretending that nothing had happened. Our battle formation, known as the Swarm of Tiny Death, has never been defeated, the Emperor continued once he regained his footing. We can overwhelm much larger opponents through coordinated attacks and strategic positioning. So-young made a small squeaking sound that she tried to disguise as clearing her throat. The Emperor apparently took this as a sign of fear, because he puffed up his chest even more and spread his tiny wings to make himself look bigger. Yes, tremble before our might, he squeaked triumphantly. Even now your primitive minds are struggling to comprehend the vast power of our empire. We control trade routes that are occasionally used by merchant vessels, and our influence extends to several space stations in this sector. The more the Emperor talked about their empire, the clearer it became that the draconian hegemony was not quite as impressive as they claimed to be. Their vast armada of 7 ships sounded like a small patrol fleet. Their legions numbering in the hundreds would barely qualify as a medium-sized militia on Earth. Their conquered territories seemed to consist mainly of uninhabited rocks floating in space. Our elite guard consists of our finest warriors, the third Draconian announced while trying to look menacing. Each one is trained in 17 different forms of combat and equipped with weapons designed specifically for our unique physiology. The guard member demonstrated by drawing what appeared to be a tiny sword that was probably about 6 inches long. He performed some elaborate sword movements that would have been impressive if the weapon had been bigger than a letter opener. His armor clinked softly as he moved, and his little boots made tiny tapping sounds on the platform. We demand that these humans submit to our authority, Emperor Scales of Infinite Darkness declared while pointing his small finger at Hyun-woo. They must acknowledge the supremacy of the draconian hegemony and agree to pay tribute to our empire. Hyun-woo tried to respond diplomatically, but his voice came out slightly strangled. What kind of tribute would your empire require? The Emperor's eyes lit up with what appeared to be excitement. We demand your finest chocolate and also any small, shiny objects you might possess. Additionally, we require comfortable bedding materials and perhaps some heating devices, as our fortress world can get quite cold. Dong-ho made another choking sound that he tried to cover with a cough. The translation of comfortable bedding materials had come through very clearly, and it sounded exactly like what someone might buy for a pet, rather than what a fearsome galactic empire would demand as tribute. Furthermore, the Emperor continued, while climbing down from his platform with some difficulty. We require that your warriors face our champions in single combat to prove their worthiness. Our greatest fighter has never been defeated in battle. The greatest fighter stepped forward and turned out to be slightly smaller than the other Draconians. He was carrying what looked like a tiny spear and wearing armor that appeared to be made from metal scales. When he tried to strike an intimidating pose, his spear got caught in his cape, and he had to spend several seconds untangling himself. "Our champion has mastered the ancient art of draconian combat," the Emperor explained proudly. "He can leap distances of up to 3 feet, and his battle cry can be heard from 50 meters away." The champion demonstrated his battle cry, which came out as a tiny roar that sounded more like a kitten mewing than anything frightening. He then performed his impressive 3-foot leap, which would have been more impressive if he had not landed awkwardly and nearly fallen over. So Young was now shaking visibly and had both hands pressed over her mouth. Her eyes were watering from the effort of holding back her reaction. The sight of the tiny draconian champion trying to look fierce while struggling with his oversized equipment was almost too much to bear. "We also possess advanced interrogation techniques," the Emperor added ominously. "Prisoners who refuse to cooperate with our demands are subjected to our most feared punishment, which involves being forced to listen to dramatic readings of our conquest poetry." "Conquest poetry," Ji-won repeated in a voice that was slightly higher than normal. "Yes, our greatest poets have composed epic verses describing our victories over our enemies," the Emperor explained proudly. "The poems are quite lengthy and describe in detail how our mighty forces overcome much larger opponents through cleverness and determination." One of the other Draconians pulled out what appeared to be a tiny scroll and began to unroll it. This particular poem is entitled "The Day We Conquered That Medium-Sized Asteroid," and it runs for approximately 4 hours when performed in its entirety. That was when Ji-won finally broke. It started as a snort that she tried desperately to suppress, but the image of being tortured by having to listen to tiny dragons recite poetry about conquering asteroids was too ridiculous. The snort became a giggle, and then the giggle became a full laugh. Dong-ho followed immediately after when the Emperor's crown slipped down over his eyes again, and he had to feel around blindly for his subordinates to help him adjust it. The sight of the tiny tyrant stumbling around, unable to see while his minions rushed to assist him, was the final straw. So Young was next, as she watched one of the Draconians trying to help their Emperor while simultaneously keeping his own cape from tripping him up. The whole scene looked like something from a comedy show rather than a diplomatic encounter with a feared galactic empire. Yun-woo held out the longest, but when the Emperor finally got his crown straightened and declared, "You dare to mock the infinite power of our empire," in his squeaky little voice, while shaking his tiny fist. It was too much even for his diplomatic training. Soon all 4 humans were laughing uncontrollably while the draconian delegation stood there looking confused and increasingly offended. The harder the tiny dragons tried to look intimidating, the funnier they became to the humans, who were now completely overcome with mirth. The entire council chamber fell into stunned silence as they watched this unprecedented reaction to the draconian hegemony. The silence in the council chamber was so complete that the only sounds were the humans trying to catch their breath between fits of laughter. 847 different alien species stared in complete shock at what they were witnessing. Never in the history of the Galactic Council had anyone reacted to the draconian hegemony with laughter. Emperor Scales of Infinite Darkness stood frozen on his platform with his tiny mouth hanging open. His face had turned bright red, which actually made him look even more adorable to the humans. The other 2 Draconians looked back and forth between their Emperor and the laughing humans, as if they could not process what was happening. "They dare to mock us!" one of the Draconian generals squeaked in outrage. "No one has ever shown such disrespect to the mighty draconian hegemony." This statement only made the humans laugh harder. Hyun-woo was wiping tears from his eyes while trying to apologize, but every time he looked at the tiny Emperor with his oversized crown and dramatic cape, he started laughing again. Velthar's crystal form was flickering rapidly, which seemed to indicate confusion or distress. Other council members were making various sounds of alarm in their different languages. Some were standing up in their seats while others appeared to be preparing to flee. "The humans have insulted the draconian hegemony," an alien voice called. out from somewhere in the chamber. This means war. The word war caused an immediate panic among the council members. Aliens began talking frantically in hundreds of different languages, while others started moving toward the exits. Even though the draconian hegemony was small, they were still considered dangerous enough that no one wanted to be involved in a conflict with them. Emperor Scales of Infinite Darkness drew himself up to his full height of approximately 2.5 feet and pointed his tiny finger at the humans. "You have made a grave mistake, laughing at the infinite power of our empire. We hereby declare eternal war against your entire species. Eternal war." So Young repeated between giggles. "With your 7 ships, 7 very powerful ships," the Emperor corrected indignantly. "Each one equipped with the finest in miniature weapon systems and capable of causing significant damage to undefended targets." Dong Ho was trying to control himself, but the image of tiny spaceships attacking Earth with miniature weapons was too funny. "How exactly would that work?" he asked. "Would you slowly nibble our spacecraft to death?" The Emperor's face turned even redder. "Our tactics are not for you to understand, primitive mammal. We have defeated enemies much larger than ourselves through superior strategy and overwhelming numbers." "Overwhelming numbers of what?" Ji-Wan asked. "Adorable tiny dragons in little suits of armor." The word adorable seemed to cause a short circuit in the Emperor's brain. He stood there blinking for several seconds as if he could not process what he had just heard. His 2 subordinates looked equally confused by this reaction. "Did she call us adorable?" one of them whispered to the other. "I think she did," came the whispered reply. Yunwu finally managed to get control of himself enough to speak coherently. "I am very sorry, Emperor Scales of Infinite Darkness. We did not mean to offend you or your empire. It is just that where we come from, you would be considered extremely cute rather than frightening." "Cute," the Emperor repeated in a voice that was even higher than usual. "You think the terror of 17 star systems is cute?" "Incredibly cute," So Young confirmed while pulling out her tablet. "Look, I can show you what I mean." She activated her tablet and brought up Earth's internet connection, which had been modified to work through the Galactic Communication Network. Within seconds, she had accessed thousands of pictures of kittens, puppies, and baby animals. "These are some creatures from our world that humans find cute," she explained, while showing the images to the confused draconians. "See how they are small and have big eyes and make tiny sounds. We have an instinctive response to protect and care for creatures like this." The Emperor leaned forward to look at the pictures, and his expression changed from anger to puzzlement. "These creatures are your warriors." "No, these are our pets," Hyunwoo explained. "We keep them in our homes and take care of them because we think they are adorable. We give them comfortable beds and good food and toys to play with." "Toys?" the second draconian general repeated slowly. "Small objects designed for entertainment and exercise," Dong Ho added helpfully. "We make sure our pets are happy and healthy, because we love taking care of cute things." The 3 draconians looked at each other with expressions of growing horror. The Emperor's crown slipped sideways again, but this time he did not bother to straighten it. "You are saying that we remind you of your pets?" the Emperor said in a voice that was barely above a whisper. "Very much so," Ji-Wan confirmed. "Especially with your tiny armor and little weapons. On Earth, you would probably be the most popular pets in history. Everyone would want to take care of you," So Young continued scrolling through pictures on her tablet. "Look, here are some costumes that people put on their pets for special occasions. See how this kitten is wearing a tiny night outfit. It looks very similar to your armor." The sight of a kitten dressed in miniature medieval armor that closely resembled draconian battle gear seemed to break something in the Emperor's mind. He sat down heavily on his platform and stared at the image with wide eyes. "We are not pets," he said weakly. "We are a feared galactic empire." "The most adorable galactic empire anyone has ever seen," Hyunwoo said gently. "I am sorry, but that is how humans naturally respond to small creatures that act tough. We find it endearing rather than threatening. The panic in the council chamber was growing worse as aliens continued to flee, and others debated what to do about the impending war between humans and Draconians. Velthar was trying to restore order, but the situation was rapidly spiraling out of control. Perhaps we could discuss this calmly, Hyun-woo suggested. There seems to be a cultural misunderstanding here. Misunderstanding, Emperor Scales of Infinite Darkness stood up again, but his dramatic posture had completely deflated. You think our entire empire is a misunderstanding? Not your empire, So Young said carefully. Just our reaction to it. Humans have evolved to find small creatures appealing rather than threatening. It is not something we can control. We evolved this way because we have offspring that are born helpless and need protection, Dong-ho added. So we are programmed to respond to small, vulnerable-looking creatures with protective instincts rather than fear. Vulnerable-looking, one of the Draconian, generals repeated with dismay. Very vulnerable-looking, Ji-won confirmed. Like you need someone to take care of you and make sure you do not get hurt. The Emperor sat back down and put his tiny head in his tiny hands. His crown finally fell off completely and rolled across the platform. One of his subordinates moved to retrieve it, but the Emperor waved him away. Our reputation, the Emperor moaned. Our fearsome reputation across 17 star systems. I hate to break it to you, Hyun-woo said as gently as possible. But if humans react this way to you, then probably other species are not actually afraid of you either. They might just be playing along because they think you are too cute to disappoint. The three Draconians looked at each other with expressions of dawning horror as they realized that their entire galactic empire might be based on other species, humoring them rather, than actually fearing their power. 3 days passed after the disastrous diplomatic encounter, and the humans remained on the council station while various alien species debated what to do about the situation. The Draconian delegation had retreated to their quarters immediately after the meeting and had not been seen since. Some council members were still convinced that war was inevitable, while others seemed confused about what had actually happened. Hyun-woo and his team were staying in guest quarters that were designed for medium-sized bipedal species. The rooms were comfortable, but the furniture was slightly too large for humans, and the doors were much taller than necessary. They had been spending their time learning about other council member species and trying to understand the complex politics of galactic civilization. On the third evening, Hyun-woo was reading reports about interspecies trade agreements when someone knocked on his door. The sound was very soft and tentative, unlike the usual confident knocking of alien visitors. When he opened the door, he was surprised to see Emperor Scales of Infinite Darkness standing in the corridor alone. The tiny Emperor looked very different from when they had first met him. His elaborate armor was gone, and instead he wore simple clothing that looked more practical than dramatic. His crown was nowhere to be seen, and his cape had been replaced with a small jacket that actually fit him properly. Most importantly, he looked sad and tired. "May I come in?" the Emperor asked in his squeaky voice. "I need to speak with you about something important." Hyun-woo stepped aside and gestured for the small being to enter. The Emperor walked into the room with small, careful steps and looked around at the oversized furniture with what appeared to be familiarity. "I suppose everything here is too big for you as well," Hyun-woo observed. "Yes, most galactic facilities are designed for larger species," the Emperor replied. "We are used to it by now." Hyun-woo sat down on the floor so that he would be closer to the Emperor's eye level. This seemed to surprise the tiny dragon, who hesitated for a moment before sitting down as well. "I came to tell you the truth about the Draconian hegemony," the Emperor said quietly. "We are not really an empire at all. We are refugees." This was not what Hyun-woo had expected to hear. Refugees from what? Our homeworld was destroyed 5 years ago by a cosmic disaster. A massive solar flare stripped away our atmosphere and made the planet uninhabitable. We barely escaped with our lives and have been wandering the galaxy ever since looking for a new place to live." The Emperor's voice grew even quieter as he continued. "There are only about 200 of us left from a population that once numbered, in the millions. We have 7 small ships because that is all we could build with the resources we managed to save." Hyunwoo felt a wave of sympathy for the tiny being. "Why did you not tell the council that you needed help instead of pretending to be a conquering empire?" "Because refugees get ignored or exploited," the Emperor explained sadly. "But empires get respect and territory and trade agreements. We thought, if we could convince everyone that we were dangerous, then they would treat us as equals rather than charity cases. But you are not dangerous at all, are you?" The Emperor shook his tiny head. "Our weapons can barely handle small asteroids, and our numbers are so few that we could not conquer a single planet even if we wanted to. The uninhabited moons we claimed as conquered territory were just empty rocks that no one else wanted. What about the other species that supposedly fear you? Most of them are just being polite," the Emperor admitted. "They play along with our Empire Act because they feel sorry for us, but they do not really take us seriously. Some species actually think we are their pets, just like you said." The tiny dragon looked even more dejected as he explained this. "The council allows us to maintain our territory and trade with other species because they think our empire performance is amusing. We are like entertainment for them." Hyunwoo was quiet for a moment as he processed this information. "So when you demand tribute, you are actually just asking for basic supplies. The chocolate and shiny objects and bedding materials are things we need to survive," the Emperor confirmed. "Our ships are old, and our resources are limited. The heating devices we requested are because our species needs warmth to stay healthy, and your gladiatorial combat demands. We were hoping to find employment for our people," the Emperor said with embarrassment. "Most of us have no useful skills for galactic civilization, and we thought maybe some species would hire us as entertainers or guards." The more Hyunwoo learned about the real situation, the more he understood how desperate these tiny beings actually were. They had been putting on an elaborate performance for years, just to survive in a galaxy where no one took them seriously. "Emperor Scales of Infinite Darkness," Hyunwoo said gently. "What is your real name?" The tiny dragon looked up with surprise. "My name is Scales. The rest of it was just part of the Empire Act." "Well, Scales, I think humanity might be able to help you with your problem." Hope flickered in the small dragon's eyes. "How?" "First, we need to convince the council that you are not actually dangerous, so they stop worrying about war. Then we can work on finding you a permanent home, where your people can live safely." Scales looked doubtful. "But if we give up the Empire Act, then we will lose what little respect we have. Other species will ignore us completely." "Not if you have human allies," Hyunwoo said with a smile. "Humans excel at taking care of things we find adorable. It is one of our greatest strengths as a species." The next day, Hyunwoo requested a meeting with the full council to clarify the situation with the draconian hegemony. When all the member species were assembled, he stood up in the center of the chamber with Scales beside him. "Citizens of the Galactic Council," Hyunwoo announced. "I am here to resolve the misunderstanding between humanity and our new friends, the Draconians." He explained the real situation with the refugees and their desperate need for a permanent home. Many council members seemed relieved to learn that there would be no war, while others appeared surprised by the truth about the supposed empire. "Humanity proposes to sponsor the draconian people for settlement on one of the moons in our solar system," Hyunwoo continued. "We will provide them with appropriate housing technology and assistance in establishing a sustainable colony." Scales stepped forward with his tiny voice barely carrying to the edges of the chamber. "I formally dissolve the draconian hegemony and request asylum for my people under human protection. Furthermore," Hyunwoo added, We believe that the Draconians could serve as excellent ambassadors for smaller species in the Council. Their experience surviving as refugees has given them unique insights into the challenges faced by vulnerable populations. The vote to accept this proposal was unanimous. Within weeks, construction began on New Draconia, a specially designed settlement on one of Earth's moons. Human engineers worked with Draconian architects to create buildings and facilities that were perfectly scaled for their small residents. Scales officially changed his title from Emperor to Mayor Scales of New Draconia. He kept his tiny cape for formal occasions because the human engineers thought it looked distinguished. The other Draconians found productive work as cultural liaisons, translators, and advocates for refugee species throughout the galaxy. 6 months later, Hyunwoo visited New Draconia for the settlement's official opening ceremony. He found Mayor Scales in his office, which was built into a comfortable treehouse overlooking the main plaza. The tiny mayor was wearing his cape and reviewing applications from other refugee species who wanted to settle in the community. "How are you adjusting to your new role?" Hyunwoo asked as he sat down in a human-sized chair next to Scales' miniature desk. "Much better than being a fake emperor," Scales replied with what appeared to be a smile. "Helping other displaced species find homes is more rewarding than pretending to conquer things." Through the window, they could see young Draconians playing in specially designed parks, while their parents worked in gardens and workshops scaled for their size. Human visitors walked carefully along designated paths designed to prevent accidents, while Draconian guides explained their culture and history. "I have been thinking about what you said about humans being good at taking care of adorable things," Scales said thoughtfully. "I think you were right, but not in the way either of us expected." "How do you mean?" "You do not treat us like pets," Scales explained. "You treat us like family members who happen to be small. There is a difference," Hyunwoo nodded understanding. "We protect and care for things we love, but we also respect their independence and dignity." "Exactly," Scales agreed. "And that is why the partnership works so well." As they talked, a group of human children arrived for a scheduled cultural exchange program. The young Draconians immediately ran out to greet them, and soon both species were playing together in the plaza below. The sight of tiny dragons and human children laughing and learning from each other represented everything good about what the Galactic Council could achieve. The Council had unanimously voted to grant humanity full membership after witnessing their solution to the Draconian crisis. It turned out that the ability to see past fear and intimidation to recognize when someone needed help was exactly the kind of perspective the galaxy needed. Mayor Scales adjusted his tiny cape and returned to his paperwork while Hyunwoo watched the children play.